Hey guys, it's Shama here, CEO of Scaling Retail, and I'm back with another weekly edition of Retailing Weekly. It is now the second week of the new year, so there is lots going on, lots of really cool articles, things happening in the industry, and I'm excited to start to unpack them for you. So let's get started. The topic we normally don't really talk too much about is really the area of fine jewelry. And there was a really great article in Business of Fashion craft of fine jewelry and how more exposure brings a lot more challenges in terms of production, scalability, etc. One other thing that I think is interesting to point out here is, fine jewelry is one of those really rare and beautiful markets where a brand that really finds niche representation and a great audience can actually stay around for forever. Right? Companies like Monique Dion, right, that sell exclusively on Barney's, beautiful high-end pieces and are really unique and kind of distinct and one of a kind. Now, unfortunately, what you find sometimes in the emerging market designer category is a lot of these brands that are coming out with high-end jewelry pieces that are more niche, that are really specific and don't necessarily have high-end distribution quite yet, is they are actually getting knocked off. And unfortunately, we've been seeing kind of this era of knocked off jewelry, knocked off clothing, etc., really reach to new heights lately. So one of the things that I think is really important, and a lot of retailers will ask me, what can we do when we ask our designers to create something that's obviously inspired by something else? Well, no one really wants that backlash of being known that they've right, or a knockoff. What's interesting though is when we do see that brands are knocking things off and that it somehow comes to press, meaning there's some kind of exposure, it is now all of a sudden heard that, for example, Victoria's Secret knocked off made. The founders are great girls, they're here in Los Angeles. And what's interesting is when articles like that kind of go to press, not only do you find that the smaller brand themselves actually get a little bit of more boost, right? So even though it's kind of sucky PR or something terrible, they actually get a little bit more brand visibility. And so that I think is really interesting. Also, of course, there are some people who will also then go to Victoria's Secret and buy that knockoff product because now they know it's associated with something that's really interesting or cool. So horrible, and I think it's a bad practice, and I never encourage any of the retailers that I work with to buy products that look like that, or any of the designers to kind of get overly inspired by that. But just know that if you tend to find yourself a victim of something like this, it might actually be that in some cases, all press might be good press. It might be not a bad idea to find some way of physically kind of getting that a little bit more publicized. The next thing we've kind of been keeping our eye on over here at Scaling Retail is thinking a lot about bots and what it is that chatbots, like what is really the future of kind of customer service. And what's so interesting, guys, is I'm finding really through personal experience and through those of my clients that sometimes customer experience over the phone, while it does provide that kind of one-to-one relationship, the best at a few things. Number one, record keeping as far as what transactions or what was said over the phone, which can sometimes lead to further customer dissatisfaction if those things aren't being adhered to. And number two, when it comes to sometimes online or real customer service experiences, you have really long wait times. And so you get aggravated customers because they're not able to get in touch with customer service as quickly as they want. And so in this recent Wired article, how bots are able to they're about to get better at customer support than humans. And it kind of outlines a few of the key differentiating points. Number one, it's going to be great in terms of, actually keeping record of what is said. I gotta tell you guys, just this morning, we got a bill from AT&T. We just got new internet. And it was so awful because they had told us that they were going to have free installation. And I was like, amazing, free installation. And then it turns out that they went ahead and charged us for it, even though 2 customer service agents had told us that free installation. So anyway, it's things like that chatbots I think will be able to avoid, right? Or AI is going to become more sophisticated. And then certainly the wait times I think is something to look out for. Now, as a small to medium-sized company, those of you retailers who are interested in trying these things out, I don't think we've quite really I don't think it's really scaled up so that it's more inexpensive or more efficient yet to use. I think that the traditional channels that are available out there for you are not quite as sophisticated. I mean, they're not going to offer that kind of seamlessness that you're looking for. However, companies start to roll this out, you'll start to see a trickle-down effect. Now, for the larger retailers out there who are listening to this, it's really up to you guys to be investing into what I like to call an experimentation budget, an innovation budget within the business so that you're able to take on these new strategies because quite frankly, you can. And it's really up to the larger business owners out there and big, more enterprise corporate companies to be on the forefront of technologies when small to medium-sized companies aren't yet able to implement that or really see what the ROI is. I remember when I used to work at Barney's, I would get random different pitch emails from different digital marketing companies that had brand new technologies and they were trying to roll out with a company like Barney's. And certainly I was not in the marketing side, I was in the merchandising side. But nonetheless, what's really interesting is on the tech side of things, tech companies do need to have some scalable experiments, right? They need to be able to show that their data and what they can do can really roll out to a much larger scale. Companies like Talkoot, which are able to do things like scale up copywriting, which I think are really fascinating, allowing you to standardize brand voice. You have to really start with a few different examples and definitely be tapping into some larger corporate brands that you're going to be able to scale and try that out with. So maybe it's not going to be a high-end luxury company that's a little bit more concerned about, how messaging and how things really land on a by customer basis, where the average order value is so high. Maybe you start to test that out with regional chains, or maybe if you are a larger company like Sears, which can use for a bit of innovation, you test that out a little bit more in terms of regional specific, right? So we're going to implement this AI technology for people who are tapping into IP addresses from California, for example, to see if that is something that is successful. Next thing that I think is really exciting, that I think everyone's going to be really happy about is Colette in Paris. Obviously, sadly enough, they are down. It's been they've closed. It's really sad in many ways. I was fortunate enough to go by there one last time before all that happened. However, ex-employees are launching a new concept store called We. And what's exciting about that is I think that we're going to find assortment, a great take on collections. I think that they'll carry over with them, hopefully, a lot of the things that made Colette such a special and unique place for a lot of emerging brands, a lot of fast fashion, high fashion, brands, more avant-garde, things that were a little bit, just passionate and kind of out there. And they really were this amazing home for a lot of these brands. Sometimes I think of really boutique opening ceremony, being the first to kind of cultivate, this type of talent. Sometimes as we think about, an artist in residency, right? It's like, who are the galleries that really take on and cultivate young artists, right? And so fashion too needs a home for that, especially avant-garde fashion, especially the styles that are pushing boundaries, right? Because all too often, guys, what we're finding is kind of this basic, styles, right? These styles come out this time, they come out the other time. Always become big in the summer. We always see denim back in September, crushed velour also in the fall, menswear inspirations. Things end up becoming so redundant that we really need to see brands that are willing to take risks, and we need to see retailers that are willing to take risks with them. So I think that is equally as important to think about. Hopefully new will also be, it's N-O-U-S as opposed to N-E-W or K-N-E-W. Think about, who are the retailers who are cultivating these brands? And, I think Matches Fashion does a good job of that. But then you've got lots of other brands, guys, retailers that are still stuck kind of in that space. Brands like Barney's, I don't think are really introducing as many new and fresh brands. They used to really have a lot of new and fresh brands, but not as much anymore. They're not quite on the forefront of it. And so I think it's really important as retailers that we look to the future of cultivating talent, because if you don't, similar to the technology bandwagon, you will then find yourself falling behind, right? We clearly see retailers who have not been of what's happening in the technology space customer service, mobile sites, digital marketing. Those companies are now going extinct. And I think we'll find a similar thing that comes up with assortment planning and the brands that they carry. Really cool new thing. Also on the side of technology, Glossy, the online publication, just published this really cool article talking about this new technology for trying on suits. It's a Japanese company called Start Today, and the technology they're rolling out with the company called Zozo Suit out in Japan, and they're going to start to roll this out in the US. Now, what I think is so interesting and cool about this is the men's suit section, and the way that we've always thought about men's suiting is obviously from this bespoke perspective, right? We saw about 15 years ago and bespoke suiting and people really coming back to men's fine tailoring and what that looks like. And then we started to see the rise of companies like Indochino, which were offering slightly customized suiting to regular bodies. They were saying, hey, these are the different regular fits. We're going to customize certain parts of that suit in order for it to really feel like a natural fit for you. Now we're taking this a step further. Start Today you a cat suit that allows you to try it on. It has sensors in there. It allows you to really fit and see what it's going to take your correct measurements. And then from those correct measurements, it's then going to be able to create that suit for you. So it is Bluetooth enabled, which I think is really great. And it generates about 15,000 measurements. So holy bananas, right? That's a lot. At Indochino, I think they took about, certainly when you go into a tailoring company who's going to create a suit for you, they certainly take quite a few measurements, but are they taking 15,000 measurements? I don't think so, right? So I think that is going to be so amazing, especially as we think about just the general customization process, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, and even women's suiting, right? It is so based on body type. And as we start to understand that, sizing in general, right? The reason how sizing really came about in the US was, back in the, Civil War, when they had to have suiting, when they had to have military outfits, etc. That's really when they started standardizing, sizes. Before that, everything was really custom made, right? Everything was made to measure. And then we kind of went through the standardization process through wars that said, hey, everyone kind of needs to wear the same outfit. We need to standardize the production. And then we started moving into these categories of these are the different sizes. We all have to fit these sizes. However, guys, that's obviously not how, and even shoes, right? You have cobblers, etc. We're really set out to be. So what's interesting is we're seeing kind of a return to customization, but again, with the implementation of technology. Similarly in customer service, a return to one-on-one individualization, but with the use of technology, right? So we're seeing kind of the next level of individualization that customers are really looking forward to this year in 2018, going forward into 2019, but with the assistance of order to really help facilitate customization and individualization on a much larger scale, right? Super cool. Really awesome things that are happening. I don't know if you guys are out there in New York, but there's an amazing co-working space that's popped up specifically for women called The Wing. I was fortunate enough to be featured with the co-founders in Women's Wear Daily, the top 20 women business leaders of 2017, which is exciting. But what I want to talk about with this co-working space is, I think is really one of a few different spaces that are popping up that are very specific. Here in Los Angeles, there's something called We Quilt, which is kind of a roaming space, and you can go to different people's homes, different spaces to do co-working. In New York, The Wing has become really popular. It is about $3,000 for a year. There's 8,000 people on the waiting list. Only about 1,500 members that are, on board right now, and it just opened up in 2016. Now, what's so fascinating is you might ask yourself, well, what is up with the rise of these kind of niche co-working spaces? And really, how does that reflect back to retail? Well, is home to a lot of great kinds of collaborations. Similar co-working spaces like Noya House and Soho House also do a lot of cool collaborations across retail, across influencers. They're starting to become back to, small clubs. And I guess we're always now today thinking about going back in time, but where a lot of social clubs were a place where people would meet, network, and kind of get to know each other. And so what's in niche spaces is, yes, you're connected with like-minded people. Hopefully the people who are going are, who are attending these events are of a similar kind of networking status, if you will, meaning you have a lot more in common. You might have a lot of similar friend groups. Maybe you guys can introduce each other to different friend groups. So things are kind of vetted, right? It's a little bit different than just walking into meetup.com 3,000 people and not even knowing if there's anything in common, right? So it's definitely a commonality. But as a retailer and as a brand, I would say starting to get memberships to these kinds of organizations is also going to really help you tap into a more micro niche base. Meaning if you do a partnership with Noya House, for example, or offer a discount right now, at Noya House, there's maybe 10 different brands that are offering discounts, right? And I think that there's an opportunity there for more brands to be partnering up with these different niche co-working spaces and really start to find ways of tapping into targeted audience. I mean, oftentimes when we work with entrepreneurs and startups, and they're saying, hey, our product is meant for everyone. Our big question is, well, is it really meant for everyone? Are you actually something that people want, or is what you're doing kind of creating something that is like what no one wants or what a few people want? So I think that that's kind of an important thing to think about, mostly because if you're not thinking about where your niche target audience is, chances are you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. So these co-working spaces, I think, are amazing, amazing opportunities to really tap into a niche space. I think that without looking at who these niche spaces are, you're totally missing out. So that means if you're a menswear brand, start to take a look at some of these different men's clubs. Trust me, there are a lot of men's clubs out there than there are women's clubs. School, some of them might have started in the 20s, but guess what? There are young men who are, well, maybe not so young, but there are young guys who are joining these clubs because they want to have a place to relax, a place to be, within a certain cohort, certain group. Certainly there are also co-working spaces, smaller ones that are geared towards people who are writers, right? There are ones that are geared towards artists, right? So start to take a look at where are these different segments of people and how can you start to tap into them? It's an amazing marketing strategy. Not too many brands are doing it. I think that a lot of opportunity. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about is fashion. And what I think is really interesting here is, we're seeing a lot of different brands start to come out with more unisex clothing. And when you think about companies like Gucci, and this is from an article from Business of Fashion, when you think about companies like Gucci, when it was super sexy and it was like hyper sexualized and very much about sexy. Now you're starting to see, the new Alessandro Michel's, new collections, which are, starting to push more gender barriers. You're also starting to see that boundary be pushed in terms of cosmetics. Ryan Seacrest is talking about coming out with a collection of beauty products, right? He has a great collection of menswear, but he wants to come out with beauty products in order to kind of get men into thinking about, hey, maybe you need a little concealer. Maybe you could use a little bit of highlighter on your skin. Maybe you could use, a little bit of a brow gel. So, right? So, I mean, it can go anywhere, right? So I think that it is really valuable and important for us to think about where the future of these collections are going and where the future of brands are going. Now, certainly, guys, not every brand should start to take a unisex approach, right? Certain brands are really built on femininity, or it's part of kind of their core brand identity or core masculinity, right? And but I think that there is an opportunity here to think about marketing campaigns. One of our clients, cool marketing around, pushing gender barriers in terms of who's wearing the product. It doesn't mean the product is still not going to be purchased possibly by women, but it's opening up our perceptions of could go, right? Who we think could really be with our products. And I think this really shows a far more progressive and forward-thinking way of looking at advertising. And also really thinking about not just advertising, but how you then start to sell it, right? So we want to think, I think, beyond just advertising campaigns. Advertising campaigns are oftentimes fleeting. They kind of project one message, but do they really carry through? And so there are some really cool brands out there that are not just projecting this through advertising, but they're carrying it through their collections. One of our other clients right now focus on a collection of athleisure that is really unisex and that's really meant to be worn by both genders. And there is something very sexy in being able to be gender fluid with our clothing. And so I would say, guys, especially for the entrepreneurs out there who are starting to figure out, what are some interesting segmentations, any brands out there that are thinking about new types of advertising, really start to push the boundary on genderless fashion, right? What is gender fluidity when it comes to clothing, and how can we kind of better express our brand values, right? If they are progressive values, if they are some things that are, more accepting and inclusive, how can we really push that, not just through advertising, which is great, but actually through some of the products that we design. Last article I'll be commenting on today, I'm so excited, I love doing these, is really what's happening with influencer marketing in 2018. That I think is really fascinating, mostly because when it comes to influencer marketing, we oftentimes are thinking about short-term campaigns, right? To go back to this previous point. For a campaign, boom, it's over. We don't really think about influencers and incorporating them into bigger parts of our brand identity. And as we kind of move forward into 2018, we're going to see longer term partnerships between a lot of retailers and influencers. Longer term meaning they're not just posting one post, but they're part of an ongoing campaign. Perhaps they're even part of developing a capsule collection. Perhaps they're even part of marketing that collection, going on tour, doing the pop-ups, etc. So at the same time, a lot more influencers that are partnering up with some of these mass market retailers to design and do their own private label, right? So at companies like JCPenney's, at Sears, certainly you guys remember the Kim Kardashian line at Sears, right? These are all kind of, branded private label collaborations, right? Only sold at Sears, right? So we're gonna start to see, not just on the celebrity side, but also on the influencer marketing side, longer term branded collaborations, things that are going to be a lot more meaningful, right? Which really takes the influencer status and elevates it really high. And I think that that's an important thing for us to think about. Influencer marketing, in fact, influencers are becoming more a part of our fundamental brands, right? We're starting to think a little bit more about who they are. We're starting to think a little bit more about how we can collaborate with them and really get in front of their audience. I wouldn't be surprised if we see, startups that are being launched that are like, hey, we actually want to tap directly into this audience. How about you, XYZ influencer? Do you want to be a part of our startup, right? Do you want to lend your brand, your marketing, and your image to our design, right? To our execution. And internally at Scaling Retail, projects like this as well, which are influencers who are interested kind of in the reverse side of building out their products, right? And building out their brands and their collections. And so what's interesting is the rise of the influencer is going to continue. It's going to be a lot stronger as we move forward. And I think what we need to be on the lookout here is how we can really implement that in more and more meaningful ways. That is it for me. Thank you so much for watching this week's edition of Retailing Weekly. We'll be back next week with other cool things happening in the retail space. If you have not yet checked out the Scaling Retail website, please do. It's scalingretail.com. We have lots of great blog articles for startups and entrepreneurs. We do a lot of great work with enterprise, corporate, NGO companies. And we have a lot of great videos on YouTube, so watch more videos. All right, guys, talk to you later. Bye.